Welcome everyone, Professor here. This video is going to cover deferred maintenance. This is the second installment under our practice topic. And the foundation of this whole idea of deferred maintenance is that the least cost expense for anything is today. Tomorrow will always cost more. There's no exceptions. Inflation, raw materials, all sorts of things impact that. We'll explore this more in a future video when we get into life cycle costing. But for now, let's just be aware of what we're seeing currently at this moment in time, at least here in the Arizona market. Escalation costs right now, according to many resources, show that we're seeing a 7% per quarter increase on costs in the construction market. It's well above the past of 2% per year. So as you can see, the longer we delay in putting expenditures in the construction market right now, it does have significant costs. By the way, this 7% per quarter escalation right now is being projected to last at least another 2, possibly 3, if not 4 quarters. Finances are always pressures on facility construction and upkeep. Always, those resources are scarce, especially with the funding. And many things compete for the funding at all times, not just the facilities, the upkeep, and the construction of new facilities. Facilities management success equals the best way to increase the value of these limited resources. How do we do that? Well, we're going to explore that in this video. Basic principle for this: there is no such thing as a free lunch. Everything has a cost, even if lunch is paid by someone else. If you go out and you decide to have lunch, or you decide to do a function at this moment in time, there's a cost. Even if you're not paying monetarily, it's a cost that you're foregoing a choice of something else. And that's what this whole principle is about. There's always a cost. The success hurdle for facilities is, how do we make our facilities last longer? The answer is maintenance. If you maintain your facility assets, they last longer, thereby creating an increased value. Now, there's a great story about this. Way back when I was younger, had a bunch of us were buying our first cars. We were in our early college years, and one of my friends had leased a car, and he had a lease for 5 years. And during that whole time, he never changed the oil. Now back then, we had the non-synthetic, so it was $20 4 times a year to do that, or $80 a year. Had he spent that for 5 years, every quarter for that 5 years, he would have saved thousands of dollars that cost him to put a new engine in at the end of that lease at 5 years. So we see it's kind of like that Fram oil commercial from long ago: pay me now, pay me later. And when we start talking about facilities, maintenance is that same thing. Now, facilities maintenance comes in 2 forms. One form is preventive maintenance, or PM. Preventive maintenance usually is described as that maintenance is done on less than a yearly schedule. It's done quarterly, it's done every 6 months, maybe even every 9 months. Then the second component of that is building renewal. Building renewal is maintenance that is done on a longer schedule than yearly. Oftentimes when we look at many of these systems, they have a 5-year life or a 10-year life with fire alarms, and that is the replacement of that would be looked at as a building renewal. Both increase the useful life of systems, buildings, and facilities. Fact: all systems are designed to a certain life cycle. Anyone who tells you different is lying to you. All things wear out. Good maintenance will help extend that life-saving future dollars on new facility construction. How do you do that? Well, good PM delays replacement, i.e. building system renewal. It can decrease operating costs too. In some places, like in your HVAC systems, if you replace the belts and shivs regularly, not only do you help that unit last longer because it won't fail as quick, but oftentimes by doing that, you actually increase the efficiency of that unit 15 to 30%, which thereby saves operational costs. This is something that usually doesn't come out of the budget of those of us on the facilities management side, but is on the operations, and that certainly can bring value to the organization as a whole. The other thing is it can increase the time for system replacement. In other words, if you keep doing these little PM things, instead of the system failing prematurely, it's going to run to that 5-year life or even 6 or 7 years beyond it. And once you go beyond there, you're now, when you do that system renewal or that building renewal, you're actually increasing that life expectancy of that building beyond what it was originally designed for. Building system renewals increase the overall useful life of the facilities. It is the best hedge against facility replacement costs. And again, going back to what we started with about everything costing more, so those long-term replacement costs, that's going to cost even more than the existing system. That's why it's always better for us to maintain and upkeep the systems that we've got. Now, these systems that are meant to fail, they fail in different levels. For instance, if you change your filter, oil, belts, and the like, those are done on very, very short terms. Those are basically seen as preventive maintenance. The thing about that is when you do that, those filters prevent the coils from getting dirty and failing earlier. And if you do those on the right time, we can actually delay the replacement of that system. If it is not done, what happens is the next level of failure comes, and it's a replacement of larger components, and it costs more, and it's done at a shorter interval than you would typically see. That's, as I mentioned before, the missing oil. That the changes that my buddy had caused him to replace the engine at 5 years, and at the same time, I bought my first car, and 13 years later, I still had that same engine in that 1979 Chevette running without any rebuilds. So it goes to show you that we really want to try to prevent and delay that next level of failure. The cost of this has been described as the inverse square rule of deferred maintenance. David Gieslin has wrote a great little article on it, and I'll put it down in the comments section here so you can read it. But what he described is if you allow a system to go to the next level of failure, it will cost the square of the maintenance to be done. In other words, if it would cost $1,000 to take that next level of maintenance, if you go to that following failure, it will be the square of that, or $10,000. Now, this is not a mathematical axiom. It is a guideline, because I discovered that when I was at the school facilities board, and by taking several little case studies that I did, we found that we were right around, when we allowed it to go to that next level, about a square of the cost. So it's a huge cost impact. Please be sure to look at that that link in the description below. I think you'll find it a great article, and it will build onto this understanding of what we're talking about. Now, let's get to deferred maintenance. While deferred maintenance sounds better than no maintenance, the fact remains they have identical risks. You are choosing to risk the next level of failure before you act on maintenance. Those risks are potentially huge, as we just saw under this inverse square rule that David Gieslin had presented, which I've done enough, had enough experience and looked at case studies in where I've worked that really shows that, even though it sounds like the numbers really go up very, very fast, in reality it will if we do it. So what is deferred maintenance? First, actual deferred maintenance recognizes that the deferment results in an increased cost, period. We know that by not doing it today, when we do it tomorrow, there's going to be more cost. As a result, actual deferred maintenance would require some current funding that we have in our pocket today, to be set aside, if you will, into a trust account, an escrow account, to offset those increased costs in the future. The thought being that by the time we get around to doing that next month, next year, 2 years from now, that it will still be the cost of today, because we've already saved up this little nest egg to offset that. Now, that cost is usually done by inflation or the next level of failure, or raw materials. Right now, we're having huge impacts on products that are shipped because petroleum costs, gas costs are so volatile right now. The act of setting those funds aside is a risk in and of itself because no one can accurately predict how much those added costs will be when we get around to it. So that in and itself is a risk. We run the risk of setting aside too much or too little. Had we start setting aside 2 years ago under our 2% per year, today it would be severely underfunded. However, if we were to take the 7% per quarter right now, we start setting that aside. Maybe a year from now or a little bit longer, when we see that drop, what happens is we're actually putting back too much, which may not be a problem. But the goal is to try to guess that as much as possible to maximize or leverage the funds that you have. Now, both no maintenance and deferred maintenance carries increased costs, but deferred maintenance is an attempt to limit those additional costs so that we can maintain that cost to what today's cost would be by offsetting that future additional cost. The no maintenance is actually the worst as it absolves the reality of the failure of systems or buildings, which is just a mushroom approach to life. These failures are designed to happen. They're inevitable to happen. They will happen. And to just ignore it is just kind of being a mushroom. And that's not going to help. We need to remember our facilities are the largest single investment organizations and individuals make. Increasing their useful life just increases their values in the long run, thereby gaining equity. Proper deferred maintenance can be a very effective tool in building value and building renewal. You can make buildings last instead of 70 years or 50 years going to 70 years, 70 years to 100 years. There's so much that you can do, and it does show the importance by operating. If we don't have the funds, we don't have those. The scarcity of resources don't allow us to do this right now. A properly approached deferred maintenance program will allow us to still not be held captive by this astronomical increase of the future potentially. There is much more to the topic of deferred maintenance, so be sure to check out both the article I wrote and David Gieslin's article. It'll be in the description right below here. If you find this video useful, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, be sure to click that little bell. You'll receive notifications every time a new video is uploaded on this channel. Remember to design well, build safe, and be sure to maintain our buildings to give a longer life to them. See you in the next time with the professor.